Welcome to Michelle's Podcast News, where we bring you the latest happenings in the podcasting community. I'm your host, Michelle Tandler. Today's episode is packed with some intriguing stories, so let's dive right in. Our first story today takes us to Latin America, where Spotify's aggressive push into podcasting created a boom, only for it to come crashing down as the company pulled back its investments. The podcast boom in Latin America started relatively late, around 2019, when Spotify began commissioning hundreds of shows. This high-volume strategy had its critics, but undeniably helped build an industry. At one point, Spotify commanded up to 90% of the market there. The podcast Mujeres Valientes, a feminist series about an indigenous community in Oaxaca, became a symbol of Spotify's success in the region when it won the Gabo Prize, a prestigious Latin American award for audio storytelling. This was just one of many podcasts backed by Spotify that garnered critical acclaim. However, over the last 2 years, Spotify has stopped investing in new podcasts in Latin America, and this has left producers scrambling to figure out what comes next. For instance, the producers of Mujeres Valientes are still looking for funding to make a second season. This scenario is part of a broader global fallout from Spotify's rapid entry into and exit from the podcasting space. In the United States, Spotify invested hundreds of millions of dollars, only to later reverse course by canceling shows and laying off staff. While Spotify was one of many players in the US, in Latin America, its name became synonymous with both the podcast boom and the subsequent bust. Maria Jesus Espinosa de los Monteros, head of audio for Spanish media giant Prisa, noted that many companies depended on Spotify's budgets to produce podcasts. Now, they have had to halt production and rethink their strategies. Spotify has not confirmed whether it will fund a second season of Mujeres Valientes, but Nacho Gil, head of marketing and podcasting in Latin America, stated that they are proud of what creators like Nayeli Lopez Reyes, the host and creator of Mujeres Valientes, have accomplished. Spotify's entry into podcasting in 2019 was marked by significant acquisitions, including Gimlet, Anchor, and Parcast, costing nearly $400 million. This was part of their audio-first strategy to become the leading producer of podcasts globally. By the end of that year, 3 of Spotify's top 5 podcasts were its own productions in Germany, and the company was also promoting new shows in countries like India, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina. Spotify's dominance in Latin America was particularly dramatic because the region had a relatively niche podcasting scene before the platform's arrival. Argentine audio producer Mariano Pagella noted that there were few local equivalents to companies like Gimlet that Spotify could acquire, so they started commissioning shows from independent producers. This sudden influx of funding made podcasting a viable career for many, leading to a rapid growth in the industry. However, by 2022, Spotify began to pull back, canceling shows and laying off producers in the US. The impact was felt globally, but perhaps more acutely in Latin America, where Spotify had been the dominant player. Many Latin American producers remained optimistic initially, but the reality soon set in as contracts were not renewed and new shows were not commissioned. Espinosa de los Monteros of Prisa remarked that while her company would be investing more money in Latin America in 2024, it would still be far less than Spotify did at its peak. This pullback has led to a market correction, forcing producers to reassess their business models and explore other avenues. Some have pivoted to video, while others have found work with non-Spotify clients, often attracted by their past experience with the platform. And there you have it, a comprehensive look at how Spotify's entry and exit from the Latin American podcast market has left a lasting impact. Stay tuned as we continue to explore more stories shaping the podcasting world. Our next story dives into a fascinating trend in the podcasting world, the increasing use of unconventional recording locations to gain traction on YouTube. As podcasting becomes more visual, creators are seeking out unique settings to stand out from the crowd. In a bid to capture more viewers, some podcasters are recording episodes in places like beds, cars, and even haunted museums. This shift aims to create a more engaging and visually appealing experience for audiences, especially on platforms like YouTube, where video content thrives. One notable example is the podcast Ghostly Encounters, which records its episodes inside supposedly haunted locations. This not only adds an element of thrill and mystery, but also makes for compelling video content that attracts a wider audience. The hosts often interact with their spooky surroundings, adding a layer of authenticity and excitement to their storytelling. Another interesting case is Bedside Chats, where the host conducts interviews right from their bed. This intimate setting aims to create a relaxed and personal atmosphere, making guests feel more comfortable and open. The visual of a casual, cozy environment resonates well with viewers who are looking for more than just audio content. Recording in cars is also becoming increasingly popular. Podcasts like Drive Time Dialogues capitalize on the confined space of a car to create a sense of immediacy and focus. The movement of the vehicle and the changing scenery outside the windows add a dynamic element to the video, keeping viewers engaged. These unconventional recording locations are not just a gimmick, they are a strategic move to adapt to the changing landscape of content consumption. As more people turn to YouTube for their podcast fix, the visual component becomes crucial in attracting and retaining listeners. Industry experts believe this trend is here to stay. The combination of unique settings and engaging visuals offers a fresh take on traditional podcasting, opening up new possibilities for content creators. As the podcasting world continues to evolve, we can expect to see even more innovative approaches to recording and presenting content. That's it for our look into the unconventional places where podcasts are now recording to gain traction on YouTube. Stay tuned as we continue to explore more stories shaping the podcasting world. Our final story today focuses on iHeartMedia, which has managed to eke out a small revenue gain in the second quarter of 2024, thanks largely to its digital and podcast segments. Despite a challenging marketplace, iHeartMedia's total revenue rose 1% to $929 million, slightly above the company's guidance. However, excluding the impact of political advertising, the gain was just 0.1%. The company did face a spike in expenses, particularly in operating and selling, general, and administrative costs, contributing to a 21% decline in adjusted earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or EBITDA. During the earnings call on August 8th, Chief Executive Officer Bob Pittman stated, "We're seeing sequential improvement in our revenue growth. While the marketplace continues to be dynamic, with a changing outlook on interest rates, inflation trends, global uncertainty, and a rapidly evolving domestic political landscape, we continue to see strong momentum in our podcast business, our digital X-podcast business, and the sequential improvement of our multi-platform group's year-over-year revenue performance." The digital audio segment was a bright spot for iHeartMedia, contributing significantly to the revenue uptick. Podcast revenue improved by 8.1% to $104.5 million, although this was below the previous quarter's growth rate. Digital revenue excluding podcasts rose by 10.3% to $181 million. Overall, digital audio revenue climbed by 9.5% to $285.6 million. On the other hand, the multi-platform segment saw a decline of 3.4% to $575.9 million. Broadcast radio, which remains the company's largest single source of revenue, declined by 0.9% to $425.5 million. The network segment fell by 12.8% to $106.6 million, although sponsorship and events showed a modest improvement of 2.4% to $39.1 million. Looking ahead, iHeartMedia expects third quarter revenue to increase in the mid-single digits, landing between $991 million and $1.01 billion. Adjusted EBITDA for the third quarter is expected to be between $200 million and $220 million, compared to $204 million in the prior year period. For the full year, revenue is expected to increase in the mid-single digits, which equates to roughly $3.9 billion to $3.98 billion, with adjusted EBITDA between $760 million and $800 million, up 9 to 15% from 2023. Pittman added, "As we look at the back half of the year, our results will reflect the continuing positive impact of an ad market recovery, material upside from political advertising, as well as the benefit of our ongoing focus on cost efficiencies." While iHeartMedia showed some improvement, other radio companies continued to struggle. Cumulus Media's revenue fell by 2.5% to $205 million, with its net loss growing to $27.7 million from $1.1 million in the prior year quarter. Townsquare Media also saw a 2.5% revenue decline, with adjusted EBITDA dropping by 8.3%. That wraps up today's episode of Michelle's Podcast News. Thank you for joining me as we explored the latest stories shaping the podcasting world. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for more updates and insights. Until then, happy podcasting.